We'll now hand you over to Peter to take you through the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the joint presentation of 3 teams that have been involved in the creation of Project Sunflower. There are several different locations that they're broadcasting from today. So we're welcome to join you for a joint presentation from London, from Geneva, and from Kazakhstan. You can put the slides up for me, please, guys, and we'll then start the presentation. Project Sunflower was put together to fill a problem that we had out here in Kazakhstan, which was a characteristic of where the country is located here in Central Asia. When you look at regulation in Europe, there are plenty of sources of information. You have the European Aviation Safety Agency, we have AAK mechanisms, we have Eurocontrol, and of course all of the regulators, and then the EU. The difficulty is here in Central Asia is that we don't have any of those mechanisms to support us. So the mechanisms that we need are completely different. The teams are made up of 3 distinct teams. Aviation Administration Kazakhstan is the customer. We are looking to see how we can improve the information flows so that we can carry out the work that we need to do, which not only gives us information on what our aviation industry is doing, but adds additional information that we can get from big data mining experience. Business Optics is an organization that we've been working with for a while to build the digital twin system of the enterprise risk management that we've been putting together. This consists of the risk profiles that we're starting to build, plus also the management of all the controls within the system, as well as looking at incidents and management of all of our things in action, like the assets themselves, but also the data that goes with them. And finally, we've been privileged to engage through Business Optics, a team of data scientists based at CERN in Switzerland. They're particle physicists in their day job, but they've been doing a great job in visualizing data for the CERN team. And they have some real expertise in looking at operational big data systems. So we gave them the task of looking at how we track aircraft. It's the same as tracking particles, and how we can do that in a much better way with very good big data mechanisms. So all of them working together, both ourselves, Business Optics and BlueNet, form a very large team, and we'll come to those towards the end, where you'll be able to see that in more detail. So moving on to the next slide. I'll take my slides away again. Moving on to the next slide. What we were trying to look at was 3 distinct cores of activity. First was to take international best practice, capture and disseminate operational processes and how they relate to, but also to then transmit that into the big data picture. So we were working with the Business Optics team for the last year to ensure that those systems were set up correctly. They now have our processes in there, and they handle a lot of automated processes, so that things like tracking C of A renewals and that is now tracked all in the Business Optics system. Supporting that is a risk database, IPBRD, and that risk database keeps our risk register, keeps our controls register, and our assets register. So we've now managed to digitize all the records for all the aircraft. And between the 2 of them, they start to bring quite a powerful set of tools on their own. But in order to move that to an enterprise risk management system, we need to create an operational data program which identifies compliance breaches, where we can set performance related targets, and to identify operator anomalies. And we're going to have a look at some of those anomalies that we've detected over the period. Next slide, please. So the Sunflower mission was created around three distinct questions. Where are our airplanes? What are they doing? And who is doing it? And the collaboration between the three organizations looked at data providers who could provide us with up-to-date data. And what you see on the screen in front of you is a picture of ADS-B data, which comes off of the aircraft for the whole of Kazakhstan, and shows you what Kazakhstan airspace is operated like. And what you'll see is a big gap around the outside. That's roughly where the border is. There's a lot of activity around us where you see aircraft moving through Russia and on their borders with China. And you see a lot of aircraft that move through the airspace. Approximately 780 flights a day move through our airspace on a regular basis. So if you move to the next slide for me. Sunflower is driven by data, and it's really important that we as a regulator work towards an evidence-based system. So what we want is high quality data which comes into the system. So we've taken ADS-B data and we took it just for a single month, April 2019. We took all of that data. There's about 91,000 unique aircraft. It was satellite tracking data, so it was information that had been obtained from satellites, so it's really good quality. And in any one day, there's about 37,000 aircraft moving around the system. Now, bearing in mind that an aircraft transmits its position approximately every 8 seconds, this means that for any period, you've got around about 4 billion data points which relate to that aircraft. And for a whole month, that's around about half a terabyte of data coming in. And that's just ADS-B data. That's before you start adding other things to it. And one of the difficulties that you have when you start dealing with data processing of this sort of magnitude is that you need quite a unique data orientation to be able to structure that data, process it really quickly, but you need to be able to use it in a highly interactive form, which is responsive to all of the parameters that we're creating as investigators. So putting this all together has taken us around about a year, and we're now at a stage where we can start using it to have a look at a number of problems that we've had. So let's have a look at one or two of the case studies. When you look at the data in its entirety, the aviation system has got a huge amount of data in it. Here you can see the teams moving around, going between all the different views that we have, and each one of them is scalable. You can see right down to airport level with quite a high degree of fidelity, and all of the little blue and yellow and red dots all represent vehicles or aircraft moving around. And we can zoom in and zoom out on this very quickly to identify areas of concern. This means that when you look at that data, it's got to be highly processed extremely quickly. So let's have a look at a couple of things that we found whilst we were dealing with this. Now, most people understand that we did quite a big inquiry in support of the United Nations into how our colleagues in 3 airlines that were registered here in Kazakhstan but didn't operate here in Kazakhstan were carrying arms to Libya. They had a particular characteristic that was really annoying. They liked to turn off their transponder every time that they were doing something that was a little bit dodgy. And as a result, they were difficult to track. In the usual databases, they didn't exist. They paid quite a lot of money to the suppliers of data on systems that you may be more familiar with, like Radar Box or Flight Radar 24, to suppress their aircraft activities so that you couldn't see what they were doing. But using the data here that we had that had come from a high quality source, we were able to track those aircraft to areas of interest and demonstrate when they had suppressed the activity of the aircraft And from additional information that we were able to get from other sources, such as flight logs, flight plans, aircraft spotters, and that we were able to show that these aircraft did actually travel to Benghazi and to other spots in Libya, carrying weapons and cash. And we even found some videos that have been taken by Haftar forces showing Kazakhstan aircraft arriving in Libya and delivering large volumes of cash to them to support their efforts. So this supported an inquiry that would normally have taken quite a large number of staff. It was actually done by a very small team. It was only a team of about 5 or 6 people. And it was carried out very quickly and efficiently and gave the United Nations sufficient grounds to take action in the first place. But it also gave us the confidence to be able to remove those airlines from operation because we now had the evidence to support it. In the second case, which is on the next slide, you can see the Horn of Africa. Now, everybody's familiar with the fact that we had an accident on the 27th of December, 2019. It involved our colleagues in Becker. And during that inquiry, we found that this airline that was supposed to be a domestic-only service airline had been operating in other parts of the world. Traditionally, we wouldn't have been able to find that information because it would have disappeared. But by using historical data that we were able to pull out of the system, we were able to not only plot where they had been in Africa, we were able to cross-correlate with information that we'd got from the investigation and demonstrate that the airline itself was keeping quite a lot of false records. The information was analysed to be able to give us flight times, altitudes, directions, which airports they'd been to, which airports they'd not been to, and most importantly, when they were carrying out maintenance, where that aeroplane was in reality and not what the flight log was actually saying. So it's quite an important piece of evidence for us to justify the removal of Becker. That was the first part of it. But it also gave us a considerable amount of tools that we could use to carry out investigations, which was done quickly and efficiently. The Glue on Net team, when they put this one together, it was actually done in about 10 days. And they gave us a high degree of confidence on the material that enabled us to move very quickly forward and supply this information to our Ministry of Interior colleagues in order to carry out work that they needed to do. So already in a conceptual phase that we were putting this material together, we were able to create tools to be able to use them to support our operation in the first place, but secondly, give us the material that we needed to be able to move on with some quite big inquiries. Next slide, please. So during the process of building this, we have already created some quite interesting tools. The dossier concept, which was here, came out of the Becker inquiry. What we wanted as regulators was not only to be able to see that material on screen, but also to be able to print it to soft and hard copies, so that if we needed to produce it as evidence or attach it to paper files to justify action elsewhere in the government of Kazakhstan, we were able to produce it quickly, efficiently, and show it in a format that could be easily used. So the dossier concept was bringing together live data that you could see on the screen that could be created from any inquiry, and to be able to print that. It could relate to a single aircraft, or if you were going in to go and have a look at some operator, you could compile a list of activities for that operator during the period, which airports they'd been to, what flight times they'd been operating, but more importantly, how they'd operated the aircraft, because we had accurate data to do that, and to be able to cross-correlate that with the records that inspectors were looking at. This was particularly important with another case that we were dealing with at the time of Sigma Airlines, who were operating in the Antarctic, and we were first of all unaware of it, but secondly, most importantly, that the aircraft was carrying passengers that we were totally unaware of on a cargo aircraft. This resulted in the shutdown of Sigma Airlines because they had fundamentally breached the license that we'd issued them. Next slide, please. So we're going to move to a live demonstration so that you can see what that looks like in a bit more detail. The reason we want you to see this is that we think there's a lot more that we can do with it. And we'd actually quite like feedback from you to be able to look at how we can increase the fidelity, but also if some of you are interested in participating in the program, we'd be interested in talking to you to see how we can utilize it to create more information which is of use not only to us but to other countries as well. So what you see here is the Sunflower login screen. This is the dashboard that you get, and you've got quite a lot of information on it. Now, everybody wants to see something different. So this particular format is that you can change whatever you need to be able to do the inquiry that you want to do. All the items are movable, so you can move them around the screen. You can zoom in and zoom out with them as you need, and you can change the colors, but you can also display different information. So down the left-hand side, you can change the color schemes, you can change which airports you're looking at, you can show the airspaces, and our own teams here in AAK have helped build that information for the Glue on Net team by creating airspace maps, which can be displayed on the tool, as well as designated points that they may wish to see. But you can also zoom in as well. So if you're doing work that is necessary, so you want to be able to see the localizers of particular airfields, you can zoom in quickly to that area, and the data will be rewritten so that you can read it in quite high levels of detail. You saw some of that in the early stages, but Daniel and the team there will zoom in on Nur Sultan, and you can see that it will quickly repaint that so that you can go down to extremely accurate levels. This enables us to do several things. Recently, the Republic of Kazakhstan government has allocated to AAK planning applications around airports. So the integration of high quality data that could be used for management of that would be extremely helpful to our airports team who are responsible for looking at that. We can start making maps of the airspace a bit more interactive. We can publish those on the website. We can also look at activities by sectioning off parts of the airspace where we can see density levels at different times of the day. So as you move to the right-hand side, you can see things called heat map, where we can actually take a 24-hour period, look at that in more detail, move around that map, and it will give us information on whether or not we have concerns about the way that that's been handled. It may identify areas of high density traffic where we may have conflicts that we need to look at. It will also help us in the research of TCAS events. So it's quite an important set of tools. And the best thing about it is that you see it in picture format. So as we move down the screen, you can see other elements which are really helpful as well. So not just graphs, but also contextual information. So you can see the flight states information, which will give you the different flight states of the aircraft based on the data that we've got, as well as QR coding it so that when we put all of this together, we're able to put a digital fingerprint on it so that we can replicate that where necessary. So if we need to produce it for evidential purposes or to support inquiries or regulatory action, we're able to QR code that so that we're able to recreate it when necessary. But in addition to that, we've got some great modeling systems. So we've modeled the 3D world and we can put flights onto that now. You can see on the right-hand side there, we have an Airbus A320, which we're able to put different labels on. And that would be useful in incident management. So We had a big bird strike recently, and we will be able to indicate on our modelling what has happened to that, where we managed to identify damage, and we can stick labels onto that, so that as a regulator with our records, we're able to build high fidelity records. The other thing that we've been able to build is mapping systems. And those mapping systems look at particular airports. So here we can see Almaty Airport, and we're able to move around this in a 3D environment so that we can have a look at this in more detail. And very shortly, the teams in their collaboration will be creating flight tracks on here, so that if you were looking at something like a TCAS event, you could paint these onto the actual maps and see what happened in quite a high degree of fidelity. And these are extremely useful from an investigator's point of view, because it puts more context than mere words can provide. The final item is we've also looked at the inclusion of drone LiDAR maps. These are laser scan maps, and this is for the management of drones. So not only can we see great detail as we move in there, but we can also map drone activity onto there. So we're now looking at, as we bring in the new legislation on drones, that we're able to paint those drones onto maps like this, so that we can examine their behaviours, make sure that they're complying with licence restrictions, but also to investigate post-incident events as well. So as the database grows of information, we're able to do an awful lot of research of moving back into the database and carrying out activity which is post behaviour analysis. So that's the system as it's been built. Still a lot more to development to do as we move to a position where we have a minimum viable product, but it's now at a stage where we think that the international community might be interested in what we're doing, because it is a completely different approach than we've used in the past, and it fills the gap of information as a regulator here, so that we can move towards a more performance-based regulation approach. This is really important because it's part of Annex 19 Edition 2 of ICAO, and it's asking us to move to a more risk-orientated structure. Risk orientation needs data in order to do that. So without it, we would struggle to be able to build the required elements. So if we move back to the presentation, so that we can have a look at the final elements of this, there are some talking points that we'd like to talk to you about. And this, when we finish the presentation, is something that we need feedback from you with. So what you're seeing is the build-up of a Civil Aviation Authority's digital ecosystem. We have lots of data coming into the system that we're able to process quickly and efficiently. We're building the hard operational boundaries, which are the regulated areas, so that we know where those regulated areas are, and we can detect breaches of those areas in a much more dynamic way. We can have a look at performance management and automated monitoring, where we can get signaling from the system when things have been triggered. We're able to provide much higher degree of safety calculation, and the analysts who work with the data should be able to do inquiries that are not only quick but efficient. Our plan is to include not just data here in Kazakhstan, but also to obtain data on all Kazakh registered aircraft where they're flying in the world, no matter where they are, so that any operation which is supervised by us with aircraft that are on our registry, we're able to determine what they're up to, we're able to work out what hours they're doing, and we're also able to give information to our inspectors so that they can strike a balance between risk acceptance or additional control on those particular airframes. So this brings us to the end of the presentation of the main elements of the Sunflower system. Our next steps that we wish to move through as we move to building the minimum viable product is what data can we bring into the system that will add value and insight? Where can we get that from? Who can provide it? And in what sort of time frame? Some of that data may be real time. Some of it may be slower time, depending on the size of it and how it can be integrated in the system and how it can be data sorted to make sure that the system can find it quickly and efficiently. What additional data from mapping can be integrated into the platform to ensure that we have the best quality information for obstacle clearance heights, for planning applications, for building our systems that control aircraft in instrument flight conditions, making sure we can see where minimum sector safe altitudes are, and we can map that onto the system. What use cases can we have for the technical setup? Are there other people's use cases that we should be looking at to see what other things that we could use it for? Is it of interest to other countries? Would they be interested in participating in the program to see what they could build from this really important toolkit? What investigatory areas might this be useful for organizations, and how can we build automated mechanisms for signaling to regulators or to operators when an event has taken place? Can we add collaborative organizations who are willing to contribute to the program so that the whole thing can be much more of a collaborative decision-making tool as opposed to just a pure regulatory tool? So those are the discussion points for you as participants in this particular presentation. We're interested in listening to what you think, first of all, of the work that we've done. Is it of interest to anybody? But secondly, is there other things that we should be thinking about as we move to a more commercial model where the system will be finished as a minimum viable product and it will be rolled out here in Kazakhstan. It's something that we're extremely grateful to the team at GlueNet for helping us build. It's quite a large team. So if you move to the next slide, there is not only the project team here, which is Linda, myself, plus my safety data team who are sitting behind me, Jana, Katja and Daria. But we've also got plenty of people supporting us from the other commercial company and our scientists at CERN. So in the GlueNet team, you can see that we have a number of advanced technical people who have backgrounds in various fields. And we've also got the commercial team from Business Optics who've been helping us build the systems that we have at the moment. So a large amount of effort has gone into this. It's a very quick run through of the technical capability of what's being built. And now we open the floor and I'll pass it back to Patrick as our master of ceremonies, who can manage the interaction with you to see if there's anything that you would like to say to us that you think that first of all we should take into consideration, but secondly, if you're interested in talking to us about things that could be built into it, then we can try and integrate them. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Peter. I mean, if somebody who has a question, would you like to raise your hand and then I can go through you in turn and you can then unmute yourself and ask your question? I'm just looking at a gallery view of you all, so I should be able to see if you wanted to raise a hand. So that would be in the reactions on the bottom right-hand corner. Or even unmute if you're struggling with that. I'm not seeing any hands, so if anybody has a question, please.
Perhaps I can ask one or two people. Rob Erskine, I can see that you're online. You're from the UK CAA and you've been supporting us. Have you got any comments on that? No, Rob doesn't want to say anything. Ben and Brian, you're also from the UK CAA, and I can see Dave Usher on there. Any of you guys got any comments?
Just a quick one, Peter. That's absolutely, it's Ben Bamber, by the way, absolutely fascinating, the granularity of the data you're getting there. I was particularly interested by the drone presentation. Could you just go over what the data source is that would enable, for example, had this system been active at Gatwick when there was or Heathrow when there was the problem with the drone trolling around? What actually is giving the data to enable the drone to be tracked in an unauthorized instance like that?
It's quite an interesting question, actually, because we've discovered that the drones do emit things. We have a drone here for flying around the airports, which we've been using for survey work, and it actually has two things on it. First of all, it's got a transponder, and if you put in a transponder code, you can actually have that displayed on an internet-provided piece of software. The second thing is you've got the feedback from the drone itself back to the controller, which gives you the ability to indicate what this particular drone is doing. So the next part of the evolution for us is to, using our own drone, is see how quickly we can gather that information and display it on the toolkit. So most of the drones seem to have it because there is an interaction between the drone and the pilot. So we need to be able to track that really quickly and gather it. DJI drones in particular have got this transponder system on it. They're not the only one, because I've seen one or two others. But we also know that people who are manufacturing drones here are also interested in putting transponders on them. So I think depending on what aircraft it was that did the violation at Gatwick, the chances are that if it was one of the commercially made drones which have high fidelity filming, the chances are is it did have a transmitter on it. And it's impossible to shut them off either, as well, we've found. So there's probably a simple way of doing it. It's the short answer, Ben.
Thanks very much. That's absolutely remarkable. And just one other technical question on the same thing. I mean, the issue of tracking the aircraft that you mentioned down in the Horn of Africa and also the one in the Antarctic. If and I'm hypothesizing a little bit here because obviously some of this stuff has never been released and I don't know the answer. But if we had an issue where somebody was deliberately disidentifying their aircraft in terms of transponder, ADS-B, MLAT, etc., how would the system then pick up the data on the movements of that particular aircraft?
Well, it was quite interesting that we did actually have that in the Arms to Libya issue, in that we had two aircraft that were moving around with the same ID on it. One of them was an Airbus A319 and the other one was an Illusion 76. We identified it because the speed of the two different aircraft was completely different. So one of the things that we've thought of doing is when you put the material into the system and you say this is an Illusion 76, there should be a set of flight parameters that go with that. So the team were looking at perhaps even using something like AI to generate profiles of these aircraft, so that if you then try and spoof that aircraft and it doesn't fly the same way, it will flag up straight away that this is something that is not working correctly. During the Arms to Libya inquiry, there was another one which actually flew from here all the way down to Equatorial Guinea, and it was shown as a LET 410. LET 410 at best, it's probably got about 1,000 miles range, and therefore it can't do 5,000 miles range.
Yeah.
So we have actually worked out how to do that then.
That's remarkable. Thank you very much. Yeah, look forward to seeing quite a lot more of that when it finally managed to get over to see you in person.
Yeah, no. When you come over, we'll spend a bit more time on that.
Peter, it's Rob here. Could I ask a couple of questions?
Of course you can.
Yeah, apologies for that. I couldn't get the mic on. Sorry, it's Rob Erskine, UK CAA. Peter, two questions that I'd like to explore. Immediately at the outset, where you were explaining the scenarios in Kazakhstan where tracing and that information would have been invaluable, I was immediately thinking around MH370 and the situation there. And as you roll out this model, and I presume it would be something available for regulators per se, in terms of global visibility outside of a nation's access, this would give that state access globally?
Yeah. One of the things that we looked at, MH370 was one of the scenarios that we looked at for a regulator, because from our point of view, we want to identify the violations that might go on with that. So as you know, it was following its flight plan and then it deviated from its flight plan. So Daniel and the team have looked to set up an automated identification tool that, providing we get the flight plan information and we're also getting the live data from the aircraft, it would identify straight away that the aircraft has gone off track, ping up an alert to someone who can then track that airplane to find out what it's doing. And it will be of interest to people like security folks as well. So my own security folks here have a huge interest in stuff not following what they've agreed to do. So 370 would then be identified fairly quickly. And because this data that we've got here it is extremely high fidelity information that's come off the satellites, this is look down as opposed to look up. So it'll take it right away down to the surface. So providing that at some stage we can access this information in real time, you would be able to see straight away that something has happened. And I'm pretty sure that the suppliers of this information would be extremely interested in supporting things like that. It was the program that we were using to justify going and gathering all of this data. What we didn't have was the tools to be able to process it quick enough. We're now there, we can do that. We can generate the profiles, we can generate the alerts. And I think from a regulatory community point of view, having some of these toolkits to be able to do that would be extremely helpful in many of the things that we've had trouble with for many years. One of the things that we got from the Beck Air inquiry, for example, is how many hours has the aircraft been doing. The team have actually got a display where you can put in the parameters of what you're looking for, and it will calculate all those hours for you, tell you which airfields they've been going to. And Zia, who's doing the translation for me in Russian, is looking after the environmental aspects of this. And at some stage, we'll build in the environmental monitoring mechanisms so that when the operators send through their material, we don't need to go and verify it, we've already got it. So there's plenty of things that we can do which are similar sort of nature, Rob.
Thanks, Peter. And just a slight build on that, if I may. Accessibility to satellites and data globally, have you got that access already, or is that subject to agreements?
No, it's still subject to agreements at the moment. You know, we got a test data set that we got, which was real information, so that we could have a look to see how we could build it. I think there is interest in obtaining more data out of it. I think if the global regulator community was really interested in doing this, it is something that we could do. I know that a number of different regulators around the world have raised the same question. We see that we've got people on here from the FAA. Maybe they might want to give us their opinion. But this is something that a multi-nation approach would be well served to work with the providers of that data to make sure that we can do what we need to do.
Thanks, Peter. And commercially, have you developed the product and thinking about how much access would cost for individual regulators, or is that evolving?
Yeah, we know roughly the charges on what that would cost, and it's something that we would pursue if there was a global view on it, that this is something that we should really pursue. I'm quite happy to talk to the suppliers of the data. I'm pretty sure that with people like you and the European Union and the EASA and that, we can also approach people like Eurocontrol and that to see what we can do. I'm pretty sure the EASA folks would like access to tools like this. Because certainly when I was working in the European Union, I would have absolutely died for a system like this to be able to go and do the performance-based analysis that we were doing. So I think it's something that we as a global community could talk about, and I for sure would believe that here in Kazakhstan they'd be more than happy to do this as an expanded global project.
Thank you, Peter.
Hello, Peter. It's Brian Roberts here from the UKCAA. There's been a lot of talk about the benefits for regulators and everything like that. But I was thinking about the aircraft profiling and performance measures on it. Would that be accessible and be of use to air operators, for performance-related issues and things like that?
I think, yeah, I mean, I would certainly like to know how my aircraft is performing. I mean, I can make some assumptions if I was operating aircraft, but wouldn't it be a lot nicer if I actually knew what it was doing? So if you want to be able to plot rates of climb, you want to be able to have a look at how the aircraft is being used. We can measure fuel burn against particular profiles. We can aggregate that. We can look at all sorts of different things. One of the things that we spoke about was actually putting the weather maps in, so that when we see crews diverting due to different activities that they might think is more efficient. Moving away from flight plans is something that we as a regulator are interested in, but also the airline is interested in as well, because if it's creating problems for the air traffic control structures, then the air traffic controllers need to be able to adapt to that. So as regulators, we should be not only aware of that, but the operators themselves should be aware of that. So I'd quite like to see a spin-off of this, which involves the operators. It'd be quite nice if we could get one or two of our own operators here working with us, but maybe one or two of the more global ones to work with us and see how it can be used to be able to give you that sort of information that you might want.
Yeah, I think so too, Peter. Thanks for that.
So that's good. Dave Ussher, you're on from the Irish Aviation Authority, and we got IAA folks hat here very soon. Have you got any thoughts? You're still muted if you're trying to talk to me, but we shall see.
Yeah, sorry, Peter. Like the previous guy, I was struggling to get the mic to work. So yeah, this is something that we've had a couple of conversations about over the years. I think some of the surveillance opportunities that it offers, particularly how they're processed or how it's processed, and how that surveillance information is blended with other operational data and perhaps weather data can certainly offer opportunities to move towards PBR PBO regulatory process, but also even in internal sort of surveillance systems within operators within most regulated entities, really. So it allows significant value, I think, to be added to the data. There's lots of data out there, but it's how you bring it together and how you correlate it and how you derive sort of valuable meaning from it that's important. And I think you and the teams have come a long way since the early days in terms of getting to the position, to the point where you're now, you know, putting out a valuable stream of data. You know, I'm sort of at the moment sitting on the ANSP side of our operation. So from the regulator, I can't really comment, but certainly I can see the value for all aviation organizations of this kind of system.
Excellent, thanks, Dave. Zia, you're in our Russian-speaking room. They've been listening patiently. Any questions from our Russian-speaking colleagues?
Возможно, есть вопросы у кого-то из наших коллег здесь, находящихся в нашем конференц-зале. So to track the data, do we only rely on transponder, or is there any other source?
Well, if we were capturing the radar
Если
data,
мы отслеживаем данные по радару,
it would be possible to integrate the radar tracks. We could take the flight plans that are coming off the system. So the system is agnostic as to what data it gets and where it gets it from. It's then how you integrate that and use it proactively. So it doesn't mind where it gets data from. It will get it from anywhere. One of the things that the team have done is that they've taken data off the internet for other things. For example, how many people make aircraft and how many aircraft we've got actually operating. So we're able to display that in modern graphing techniques, so that you can see that contextual information. So if you're dealing with Cessna 172s or Antonov 2s, they are the largest production of aircraft in the world. We now know that from the material that they're doing here. And on the basis that if we were able to match that to particular transponders so that you know that this relates to these sort of aircraft, you could see what they were doing. So it doesn't care what data it gets. It doesn't mind where it comes from. It likes as much data as you can throw at it. And the team will look at how they integrate that into the system. And then we can look at how we can improve that.
so for if they shut off the transponder, we still can track the aircraft, right?
Yeah, so even if they turn off the transponder, it should identify that. It's something that we looked at in the Arms to Libya inquiry. So it'll identify that the transponder is no longer broadcasting. By taking the profile of the aircraft that you've got, you might even be able to produce some predictive tracks as to where they're most likely to be. Any more questions?
Do we only see this on the point when the transponder was shut off, or?
You see the track all the way up to the point where they turn it off. And then as soon as they turn it off, you don't see it anymore. Bearing in mind that turning any transmitter off is deeply suspicious, we can build automated alerts in the system that will tell us when people are doing that.
We have one more question.
Yeah.
What theory are you using when you were showing the 3D map for location?
Daniel, that's one for you. Digimapping.
Sorry, can you repeat that one? Sorry.
What theory are you using for the mapping? Theories. Terrain.
Can you come closer to the microphone?
Yeah,
Sorry
no,
about-
terrain. Yes. What terrain are you using for mapping?
So these are height information so you have seen basically, I think, two different ones. One was basically coming from one was coming from LiDAR data. This is some example LiDAR data that Peter showed for the drone example. So this was captured with the LiDAR. The other one, the big terrain that you have seen from Almaty, there are some, internet and data service providers today on the internet who basically provide this kind of information. So this is publicly available data that one can use to get this information, and some of them is freely available. If you want high resolution data, it is often necessary to buy that data, but there's a huge amount of data providers around there. So if you're interested in discussing for exactly what kind of application, which data provider might be interesting, we're happy to talk about that.
So when you were showing the map, different features on the website, you've shown the airport location using the laser scanning. Is it the only option that we have, or can we have any others?
That's still to me, or Peter, you want to go for that?
No, I think the question, Daniel, was whether or not we were able to absorb other maps. I think the short answer on that, Daniel, correct me if I've got it wrong, is that we'll have a look at any map to integrate it. The more fidelity it's got on it, the better the quality of the map, the more interested that we are in using it. So, for example, if you take the planning application aspects of our work, we want really accurate maps for that. But we've also got another piece of functionality which we're building into it, which is geofencing. So for management of drones here in Kazakhstan, the concept is that we would set a defined area where either a drone can operate within or a drone is excluded from, and we would expect the drone to be able to pick that up and ensure that they don't breach any of the requirements that we've got. So we would use the same mapping systems and our data system here to be able to ensure that people have got those maps so that they don't breach our requirements. But we have a large agricultural community down the south who are very interested in geofencing fields for the purposes of spraying fertilizers and pesticides. That's also quite interesting from us as we move into a drone managed world, because we want to be able to allow the drone to operate in that field without constraint, but ensure that other people remain clear of it. So it's one of the pieces of work that we've got in this, is to be able to geofence areas both dynamically but also in a static way. So if you've got a security reason to keep something out, that we can build a fence around that. But if you have got a short-term aspect, we're able to flexibly use the airspace by defining that area at low level outside of the air traffic control system, so that people can operate whatever they need inside that area.
And how accurate is the data in centimeters, meters?
At the moment, it's standard mapping. So if you've got more accurate maps, we'll look at trying to integrate them so that we can use them. what we'll do, Zia, is I'll come over and talk to them about it after we've finished.
Hello, Peter. Ben Bamber again, UK CAA. Just as a query for the team in general, as I say, the technology looks absolutely superb. If you were, oh, hang on, you just sent me a message. There we go. So that's me. The question I'd have in this particular field of data acquisition and display for this sort of purpose, that is to say regulatory oversight, whether it be performance-based or otherwise, what are the specific features that this system offers over and above, for example, Flight Radar Gold?
Essentially, Flight Radar Gold and that is a system which is utilizing flight radar technology, but at a much higher fidelity level. So it does show you what it's doing. What it doesn't have at the moment is all of the ability to suck in other data on a, I need to be able to see that, so you can generate queries in a much more dynamic way. The current systems are locked into displaying what you need to see when you need to see it. We're far more flexible than that. If you want to be able to see data maps from weather with tracks of aircraft with high fidelity mapping, with perhaps drones integrated in it, we can do that today. Whereas Flight Radar Gold probably won't. Now, the main issue with Flight Radar 24 and Radar Box and all these other things is that operators do pay money to suppress their codes, and they are removed. So when we were doing the Arms to Libya inquiry, we know through the United Nations that Sigma Airlines, Genis and Azee all paid €500 a month to have those flight codes removed from the system. And so how can you be absolutely sure you're getting everything?
Well, I certainly wasn't aware of the last point. That's fascinating. The drone application on its own, I think, really stands out for me. I'd be most interested, and I would imagine quite a lot of regulatory authorities all over the world would be honing in on that with immediate effect. Thanks very much.
No, you're welcome. When you come out at some stage in the near future, we can perhaps do a larger demonstration of what it's capable of doing.
Very much look forward to that, Peter. Thank you.
Right, anybody else? In that case, then, I thank you all for joining our presenters from GlueNet and behind the scenes with the Business Optics team. Patrick is our Master of Ceremonies, and from all of us here at the Aviation Administration of Kazakhstan, thanks for joining us. And we hope that you found it interesting. And we look forward to seeing how this develops. And hopefully you'll come and talk to us about these developments in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Peter, will you be circulating the presentation and recording?
Yeah, the presentation has been recorded in Russian and in English, and it will be going out on our website as a release from us as soon as it's ready.
That's great. Thank you, Peter. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
You're welcome. Do take care.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Bye-bye.
No worries. Take care.